This is listener-supported health and wellness radio, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. You're listening to the Global Awakening Radio Network. Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is March 8th, Saturday, March 8th, 2014. And boy, do we have an exciting program for you today. Not only are we going to have a special dedication to your friends and mine at the DHS and the NSA, we're going to be playing Mariah Carey a little bit later on. Of course, we're going to be playing Obsessed. Why are you guys obsessed with me? Holy crap. Okay, anyways, what we're going to be doing this morning is how much fun can one person have at jury duty? Okay, we're going to have a special guest on that, among other things talked about, he's going to give some accounts of his time educating those people that he interacted with in the justice system, and also other jurors and things like that. We'll be getting into that in just a minute, right after this message. I can't wait for the show to get started. Hi, this is Paul for KarmicWhoopAss.com. KarmicWhoopAss.com is a global group intention website, a meeting place for like-minded individuals to meet and combine their love and above intentions with other truth and light-loving people. Check the homepage. On there, you'll find a list of intentions. Intentions focused on truth, on love, light, and the health of Mother Earth and every living thing in her care. Intentions for modifying the molecular makeup of pollution to help put and keep our planet in good shape for our children and for generations to come. Intentions to uncover natural cures and technologies our planet desperately needs. You'll also find a very special place in the intention script where you can send loving thoughts to the intention field for those you know who are in need. Once there, those intentions take on the power of everyone in the group. Visit KarmicWhoopAss.com. Check out the chat rooms. Converse with like-minded souls who are just trying to make a difference. Isn't that really what any of us are trying to do? Let's do it together. KarmicWhoopAss.com. That's K-A-R-M-I-C Whoopass.com. Let's open a can. Absolutely, let's open up a can. You know, it's one thing to ignore darkness, or to not let darkness or negativity encroach upon your life by not giving it energy. Okay, it's one thing to not allow that to beat you down. All right, it's completely another to bury your head in the sand and say, I can't hear you. Okay, let's try to strike a balance between being informed and knowledgeable and being happy. Can we pull that off? I hope so. Hey, good morning. Good morning, special guest. How are you? How would you like me to refer to you during the program?
Well, everybody kind of sort of knows me online as Decade, but you can also call me Captain John.
Captain John. You know, that has kind of a nice ring to it.
It does when the crew responds accordingly.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. There you go. All right. So I have so been looking forward to this program. I mean, I've slept like on the average of 3 or 4 hours a night over the last week since we set this up. And so are you still kind of giddy over your experience?
Well, I don't know about giddy, but I guess I'm pleased that I was batting 500. I had one judge that responded well and one judge that responded as we would anticipate, so that was kind of cool. But I think I had more fun drilling home the point to the people that I met that were in the jury call-up pool, because it was a great cross-section of the population. We had professors from Northwestern University, and we had housewives, and we had 20-something college students, and we had architects. I mean, so it was a really, really cool cross-section of people. So when I have a chance to address such a diverse group, there's a chance that, somebody might actually, get it.
Somebody might actually figure it out.
And when you deal with the more higher educated set that are so entrenched in the system and their beliefs, when somebody like me comes along and says, well, that ain't so, and then I'm going to prove it, and then I go and do, it has an impact. People did not go home the same way they were when they walked in.
So, Rod Class is one of your favorites to study and listen to. And did you pick up the stuff, the ammunition from him, or what?
Yeah, because I advocate for a foreclosure case. I started paying a little more attention to the law back 3 years ago when it started, and I do believe that I originally got rooted in Stop the Pirates blog.
Okay.
And I forget the gentleman's name, but he does an awesome job, and he's got a wonderful website. And I remember back then that for $65 you could get everything he had. And what he had was tremendous. He had all kinds of documents, he had explanations, he had defenses, he had case law. And for somebody that knew absolutely nothing about anything, it was a great start.
So it would be a great gift idea, Does he sell gift certificates, so you can give them to all your friends at holidays and stuff?
I have zero clue. I don't really know.
That would be a
but that led, once I got my foot in the door, so now you're aware. Then I grabbed a book called Cracking the Code by Peter Hendrickson. And Mr. Hendrickson has a website called losthorizons.com, and I often post his newsletter on various Facebook groups. He wrote the book Cracking the Code back in, I believe it was around 2002, 2003, and it was all about the IRS and the tax code. And he had the distinction of being the only person in the United States who had gotten a refund of every penny he ever gave the federal government. It goes beyond the taxes. That's in the Social Security and FICA as well.
Oh, really?
And he explained how the statutes and codes were written to keep information hidden, because there would be a section of a definition in one statute, and there would be the second half of the definition in a code. And he explained the process of how they cleverly constructed this entire statutes and code fraud to keep it hidden from you. And it was hidden until 2002 when they digitized the entire code. And that was basically the downfall of the IRS, because now you could write computer programs to search and put together that complete definition that was scattered about through different sections of the statutes and codes. He was the first to do that. So that's where he gained his knowledge, and that's how he became the first person to be very, very, completely successful in getting all his money refunded. So then he started up his website, Lost Horizons, and I often post, for people that don't believe this, he has a page of people who have successfully fought the IRS and gotten a refund. And I think he's up around $16 or $18 million now in refunds for people. And the list is, 50, 100, 200 people long, and it's added to every day. And that really opened my eyes, because that's when I learned about the fraud of the cabal as regards our statutes and codes. And if you learn how they do it, what's the logic behind it, the secret tips, then you can go in and start to learn what sections may be applicable to whatever situation you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So then, because I'm in a foreclosure situation, I came across David Kreger. I caught him with 2 interviews on Alex Jones. And I was absolutely just floored by this guy. And his book explained in great detail. It's called Clouded Title. And it explains, he spends about 80% of the time talking about MERS, the Mortgage Electronic Registration System, which is just a fraud that was set up specifically to be an intervener in between you, the person that just bought the house, and the bank loan people. And what they do is they just basically hose the county recorder. anytime you do a real estate transaction, it's got to be recorded in the county, and there's a long and solid and beautiful history behind county recorders, because all of our land deals were very accurately kept in records in the county. And theirs came along to blow that completely out of the sky. And the banks would now just, the fraud of mayors would be that since you're a member of mayors, everything is taken care of in-house. I'm not going to get too technical, but so now you're not filing any paperwork. You're not filing the sale of the home in the county anymore. You're keeping it in-house in mayors. And that was the fraud behind that. But the rest of the book discusses the fact that 80% of the titles to land in this country are clouded, meaning that there is some problem either with the chain of custody of the note or the chain of title, where you could possibly legally sell your house. And even we've heard about the fraud of behind the foreclosures by the banks. But the bottom line is, even if you're successful in the foreclosure, technically, if the law was being adhered to, you can't sell the house anyway because the title is not clear. So I got into that, and that was very valuable. And that led me to Rod Class.
Okay.
And once I found David Kreger, then I found Rod Class and Winston Shrout and Jordan Maxwell. And so those people became sources. They all know each other and they all talk to each other. But Rod Class is a good old boy from North Carolina. He's got a 12th grade education. He's a welder and an auto mechanic. He has zero law background. And he just got into this. He got a burr under his saddle. He started learning the material, and he began sharing it. And everything that he puts out is free. He doesn't charge a dime for anybody. And I've just put a lot of emphasis in what Rod says, and then I back it up and corroborate it with Jordan Maxwell and Winston Shrout. And, of course, our good friend Gregory Kachaturian. He's an amazing guy, and he has a vast amount of knowledge. As a matter of fact, I listened to him on Rod Class's last broadcast. I listened to it last night. And so these are the people that are guiding me in the right direction and helping me along to get it right. So that's kind of it in a show as to how I attained the background information that I possess.
Okay. Now, this is pretty much a common theme. Now, you said that that Rod Class, he basically learned this stuff, picked this stuff up. He set forth to pick this stuff up because he got screwed by the system. Okay. Well, pardon me. He's not the only one. One name comes to mind, and we spoke about this a little bit last night, was one of my favorites is Dean Clifford. He's up in Canada. He's knee deep in the Freeman movement, and he explains the difference between the law of man and the law of code and acts and statutes and things like that. But he's a builder. He's a construction guy, okay? And tradespeople, it tend to be the ones that, they just, instead of taking it, they just get pissed off and they start looking, and boy, do they find the fun stuff. So. Yeah,
it's, you bring up an excellent point. Throughout my entire life, no matter what, branch of my journey, what path I was on, has always been led by being a victim. And 100% of the people that I have come across, currently with the citizens' grand juries, the people that are into the freedom fighting movement, the bottom line is we all got hosed, every one of us. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. So it's amazing as I walk through life and I meet all of these people and all of these activists and all of the things that they're doing, every one of us has been hosed. That's the motivator.
But instead
that seems to be an absolute. I have not found a break in that chain.
Right. Well, and instead of sitting down going, oh, well, hell, that's the way it is, they got pissed off and started doing something about it. So that's awesome. That's way cool. So you did. Let's start with the good news first. Let's start with the enjoyable interaction that you had with the judge. Well, I don't know. I guess pissing one of them off and seeing her hair stand up on the back of her neck was probably kind of enjoyable for you too. But let's talk about the one that was well received when you were sharing your story. How did that come down?
Well, and I don't mind mentioning his name. His name was Flanagan, Judge Flanagan. When I do not like you or I detest you, I don't remember your name, so I don't remember the name of the female judge. But Judge Flanagan, I felt a good vibe when I walked into his room. But of course, both judges had this beautiful, smooth, sugary, sweet, hello, how are you, welcome to the court, this is what we do kind of presentation. And of course, that just sucked me in with the bad judge, but the good judge did the same thing. So I'm a little wary. But he was, I'm going to guess, it was very hard for me to discern, but I'm going to say that he was probably well beyond 65 years of age. I think it was a safe bet. So he was a senior jurist, and he did his, they have a common rap, all the judges have a common rap about, why we're here and what we do and blah, blah, blah. And then they swear you in. And after they swear you in, he asked, which the first judge did not, did anybody not take the oath? And I raised my hand, and there was a moment of shock that ripped through the courtroom. And he said, well, why didn't you take the oath? And I mentioned that at some point, after the case is completed, they're going to ask us to rule on the case. And both judges stated in their opening statements that they would give the jury instructions and then point out the applicable law. Now, when the first judge said that, I took great issue with that statement, as I did with the second judge, because I knew that law had zero to do with admiralty court. It's all statutes and codes. And I have done my homework and know that the statutes and codes are a fraud. So I mentioned to the judge that when it came time for me to work with the jury on handing down a decision in the case, I could not discharge my duties as a juror honestly because the statutes and codes are a fraud. So that that started a whole line of questioning and interchange between myself and the judge.
Okay, and how did that go? Come on, give us more. Give us more.
Yeah, I'm having my first cup of coffee here, trying to get my brain started, even though I'm being hammered by extra low frequency pulse microwaves.
I resemble that comment.
Yeah. So he had mentioned, well, I just got into it. He said, well, what specifically are your objections? So I mentioned that, we're in an admiralty court. I'm pointing at the fringe on the flag, and I pointed that out. And and I said, this is not a common law court. You are here in commerce to administrate between two corporations for a financial transaction. And I said, I sincerely doubt that either the plaintiff or the respondent know that they're corporations. I sincerely doubt that. And I don't, because of their birth certificate bond, I don't believe that either the plaintiff or the respondent understand that the two lawyers that represent them and the judge of the bar and to the Crown and not to their clients, and he admitted that as well.
Okay, now you fuzzed out there for a little bit. So can you go through that one more time?
I had. Let's see, where did I leave off?
Just this last part, that the judge and the prosecutor or prosecutor.
Oh, we were talking about the bar. So, we're all members of the bar, and the bar stands for British Accredited Registry, and that is a corporation that is registered with the Crown, which is another corporation inside the City of London, which is another corporation. Mm-hmm. And they don't represent their clients. That they are foreign agents, and that their loyalty is to the Crown. So this is not what you think it is. This has nothing to do with dispensing justice. What you're really saying is the statutes and codes, and I can't, in any clear conscience, do that. And so that's why I did not take the oath.
Okay. And what did he say to that?
Well, he actually shocked me. First of all, he was just smooth as silk and sweet as pie. And he acknowledged my point. And he sympathized with it. He understood exactly where I was coming from. And, of course, I expected, a much different reaction. However, what he did is permitted the jury selection process to continue as if this had never happened. And so, I had to sit there through the whole deal, and you got to sit there all day anyway because they're going to cut you a check at the end of the day, so they don't let you go early anyway. But the two lawyers questioned me in their normal fashion, and as I had anticipated, neither lawyer wanted to touch me with a 10-foot pole. Mm-hmm. And so I was obviously not selected. However, one of the things that was most refreshing was that I had removed the fear of the potential jurors in the courtroom, of being in court, of dealing with lawyers and dealing with the judge. And when I had my say, as I described, all attention was sucked out of the room, and you had this wonderful cross-section of people that had absolutely nothing to do with each other than we all live in the city of Chicago. And then that opened up a very refreshingly honest exchange between the judge and the lawyers and the jurors, potential jurors. And they were very, very, very honest. And quite frankly, you don't see that very often under those circumstances. And I was most pleased with that. That was a surprise. I had no control over that. I just kind of got the ball rolling, and people grabbed it and ran with it. And to me, that's an absolutely wonderful thing. That's very optimistic to where we're going and how we're going to get there. That was very impactful.
That is a gentle shakeup of a win.
Yeah, because even with the first judge, and Rod Class will mention this, this is business. It has nothing to do with justice. It's all about money. As Greg Cacciaturian is very fond of saying, the court is a bank, and it is. And he uses that analogy quite well. And all they're there is to collect money. It has nothing to do with justice. And so they have their statutes and codes that they play by. So you don't want to be in their face. You want to be polite. You want to be professional. You want to have a calm demeanor. And you want to make sure that everybody understands that this is just business. It's nothing personal. We both understand the ramifications behind that, but that is your presentation within a court of law. And no matter what level of expertise you have acquired, you need to keep that calm demeanor in my own experience with the two judges, you can see why. One guy was sweet as pie, and the other was hellfire bent on demonization. So you have to be able to handle both. And by keeping a calm demeanor, by being non-confrontational, by pointing out this is just business, you have a much better chance of getting these presentations through and having them take root. And I can't emphasize enough how important that is. It's nothing personal, Judge. It's just business.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what? So the other judge, and she was like sweet as pie, and she was like the picture of fuzzy bunniness and warmth and charity and good nature and and all the sugar and spice things all wrapped up into one until you walked in.
Well, she had mentioned the same thing in a rap that, with the jury instruction. Okay, I'm going to, at the end of this case, give the jury their final instructions and point out the applicable law. She used the word law. And I objected to that vehemently. Absolutely vehemently, because I knew that had nothing to do with the truth. It was going to be the statutes and the codes. And so I took issue with that immediately, and I went into the explanation of the law. And the law, as I understand it, at the state level in Illinois, is that it's passed, a piece of legislation is passed by both houses of the assembly. It is signed by the governor. It is placed in the state register, and after posting for whatever legal time period it is, there is followed an enacting legislation, which is a little piece of paper that says this law comes into effect on this day. And you must have all of those elements for a law to be a law. And she said, okay, fine, whatever. And I immediately started to repeat that process for the federal level. It's exactly the same. It's passed by the House, it's passed by the Senate, it's signed by the President, it's put in the Federal Register, there's enacting legislation. But I got halfway through that explanation, and she became very impatient. The ogre was starting to pop out. She didn't even let me finish that. So,
rude.
I got cut off, and I could see the steam boiling. And I cut to the chase. So I looked right at her and I said, well, all right, let's just understand I have no use for the fraudulent statutes and codes. And at that point, Mount Vesuvius went off. And she looked at me and said words that were magic to my ears. She said, you are dismissed. Leave my court immediately. Those were her exact words. So it was a very chilly day, so I grabbed up my parka and my mittens and started walking out the door. And I had a conversation with some 20-somethings out in the hallway before we entered the courtroom about what I was here to do and how I was going to do it. And then I went in and did it. Mm-hmm. So as I'm walking out of the courtroom and I'm almost to the door, there's these 20-somethings that I had a chat with, and I just said, I said, questions? And the judge went off like Krakatoa instead of Vesuvius. And she just started yelling at me about disrespecting the court and speaking out loud in her court without permission. And worse yet, speaking out loud in her court without permission while she was speaking. So I just calmly turned around, put my best Cheshire cat grin on my face as I'm spewing feathers, and apologized. And not in a facetious way. I mean, there was no heart in it, but it was a professional apology. And then I walked out the door before she could say boo.
Okay. And what happened when you met the bailiff outside the door?
Well, she was kind of a fun thing. She's a middle class black gal, and just if you know anything about Chicago, we don't want nobody sent. It's a very corrupt, nepotistic political society. So she's got connections to get her job, and she's working at the Daily Center. She's hooked. And she looked at me, and she had to go get the paperwork that you fill out as a juror So the lawyers have some background. They got your name, they got your address, they know where you live, they know what you do, blah, blah, blah. That little piece of paper, that's your little ticket, that's your curriculum vitae for the court. And she went and picked that up, and she came back out, and her demeanor had changed. She said, the judge said, you are disruptive. And she said, if you're not careful, you do this again or continue to do this during the day, you're going to end up in jail. And I looked at her and I said, look, honey, it won't be the first time, and that's a fact. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, I cannot be intimidated, and I will not be intimidated. And then I mentioned to her, I said, this is our house. This does not belong to the judges and the lawyers. This belongs to us.
It certainly doesn't belong to the British Crown.
Yeah, and we're going to take it back. So she was pretty shocked by that response, mostly because of my calm demeanor and my directness and having absolutely zero fear. I mean, I had my honey ready with bail money.
Mm-hmm.
I was ready.
Okay.
If she got the call, she'd come and bail me out. It'd take a couple hours to process me, so she has not in any hurry to get down there.
Yeah.
So I had my butt covered. I was ready. I was ready to go to jail.
Right.
No problem. But it didn't go that way, and I think part of the reason, is who I am, my own personal power. But I think a lot of it has to do with timing. We're here approaching ascension. We have all of this wonderful plasma energy entering the earth and elevating our awareness and changing our DNA. So I think that it's helping lift the veil. It's helping suppress the evil, and it's helping people open their minds to what I had to say. And I think that had a lot of it. I don't think I would have had the same experience 24 months ago, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I can certainly believe that.
It's the old timing thing. I think timing was good. And I have always known somewhere inside my life that, I'm kind of a go-with-the-flow guy because I'm an adventurer. And I know that because I deal with Mother Nature, I know I'm not in control of anything, even though we think the falsity is that we want to be in control of our lives, and we want to control our house, and we want to control our workspace and all that. We're not in control of anything. And if you just go with the flow, and you lead with the heart, because the mind will mess you up, or the Kabbalah will help you in that regard, mess up your mind. But if you lead with the heart, and you're sincere, and you really are here doing the Creator's work, and you are trying to improve the situation for everybody, you will be given guides, and you will be protected. And I take that very, very seriously. I've obviously come to understand it at a deeper level as I've gotten older than I did when I was a young 20-something running around bulletproof and invisible and just pushing it because it was fun. Mm-hmm. Now I don't push it because it's fun. I push it because it's necessary. But I am protected, and I am guided, and I have some wonderful mentors. So I think the combination, it's just the right time with the right reasons to have had that presentation, and that's why I was called and placed in that position. Nobody saw this jerk. Hell, man, I grew up in Chicago. I'm 57 years old. I never got a jury summons ever. Mm-hmm. Why now? Well, I think if we're all listening to this conversation, you know why now. Now is the time to do this. Now is the time to push the door open a crack and let in some light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well...
And who knows through the butterfly effect with this group of people, because some of these people were pretty sharp, regardless of your education level. Education has nothing to do with being sharp. Absolutely nothing. There were some very sharp people in that room of all ages, races, creeds, colors, and religions. And you got to wonder what kind of spark got, lit inside them about this. And that's how it happens. That's how it snowballs. That's how we get things done.
Yeah. And if you can have a little bit of fun while you're doing it, so much the better. Dean Clifford, I had mentioned to you earlier that he loves getting arrested. I mean, if there's nothing to do, excuse me, And, you know, he'll sit in the canteen, and he's certainly not going to be in the TV room because, you know, oftentimes they're watching like rap videos or they're watching mainstream news or, you know, stuff that he knows is just flat garbage. And so he just grabs a pencil and a piece of paper and sits down at the table there and holds a pencil up and says, "Okay, who wants to hear about your rights? Who wants to learn about your rights?" And a bunch of guys come over, you know, 5, 6 guys, and he talks to them because he's got nothing better to do, and he informs them of exactly what's happening to them, why and how, and in the meanwhile, he's self-representing. He's filing briefs associated with his case, and the jailers are actually faxing his documents, his witness documents, to the court for him while he's in jail. You know, he asked him, you know, how can I get these? I have a hearing tomorrow. How can I get these in the court record? And they said, well, can you call somebody to come down and get them? And he says, no, I can't do that. But I'm self-representing. I am my attorney. I need to get these in the court record. And one of them said, well, I suppose you could fax them. And he said, oh, really? So he started handing documents to them to be faxed. So he's sitting there watching TV, and all these other guys are sitting around. And the jailers are coming down with his packets, and they say, here you are, Mr. Clifford. Your documents have been faxed to the courthouse, and here's the receipt. Here's the facsimile transmittal report. And he goes, thank you very much. And then he just turns and he goes right back to watching TV. And while he's doing that, all these other guys are sitting around there going, what the hell just happened here? The jailers and shit, they be coming down here. They be doing shit for him. What's going on? So he'd have a huge amount of fun. So I'm sure that you could have made ample use of your time at the Gray Bar Motel and maybe helped out quite a few people while you were there.
I laugh because I will mention that because of the way that I push the fraud of the law, I have been arrested, I think, 3 or 4 times. But and to illustrate Dean Clifford's point, I've never been locked up. It's always been a processing. You're in, you sign your paperwork, you put up your bail, and you leave. I've never been locked up in a cage. I've always been able to do a Dean Clifford, but not get locked up.
Well, there's danger in signing the paperwork anyway, because anything you sign is contracting with them.
Yeah. Well, who knew at that time, you know?
Yeah. So,
well, when you're in, all you want is out, and then you can regroup and, you know, counterattack.
Well, you know, my ears are kind of sort of burning right now, and I'm thinking it's because there's a lot of listeners that want to hear more about getting a refund from the IRS. Is there? Can we go into that a little bit deeper? Because I'm thinking that's well, personally, I know that there's tens of thousands of dollars that they had gotten out of me. And tell you what, I could really use them right now. I could. So.
Well, it's not my strong suit, but you start out with you're really going to get down to your fictional entity, your straw man. I mean, that's kind of the be all and the end all. But it is so important to understand these legal definitions. It is, in fact, and I don't know why anyone doesn't use this analogy, but it literally is a foreign language. You have to learn a foreign language. When you are summoned for whatever reason, and this is, I'm going to answer your question. I'm also going to lead into the cutting edge of where Rod Class is right now, because it's simultaneous here. When you receive paperwork from the court of law, and it has an entity defined on that piece of paper in all capital letters, Captain John in all capital letters, Paul Biener in all capital letters. It is easy to frivolously say that is my straw man, that's my corporation, that's a fiction. But that doesn't cut it. That doesn't really mean that much, and you will get yourself in trouble. Basically, I tell people you'll get 6 months in jail for contempt, and you'll serve 3. That's standard rap all across the country. Happens every freaking day. But what was really going on there, and what Rod Class, after 20 years of doing this, where I am very excited, and I think he's got the keys to the palace, your get out of jail free card is before any procedure starts. And we are dealing with administrative law. That is the most important thing to understand here. We're dealing with the rules and the regulations of the boys club that they wrote, that they are supposed to operate by. You're not arguing the merits of the case, not dealing with statutes and courts. This is administrative law. It's like I use this analogy so often. It's like being in a 6th grade Catholic school English class, and the nun is teaching you how to write, and you have to have the right letters, and they've all got to be level, and your punctuation has got to be right. That's what's going on here. So your entity, in that all capital letters, has several definitions. So you simply ask the judge to define what entity the court is addressing under the statutes and codes. And I'm not going to get this perfectly right, but are you a corporation? Are you an association? Are you a flesh and blood living man? Are you a joint stock corporation? Are you a branch of government? These are I always forget the other 2 definitions, and I don't know why. But that's just under the statutes and codes. And then if you go over to the Internal Revenue Code, it basically repeats that. It's a little different, but it's very similar. There are all of these different definitions. And then when you get into where they call you a person or an individual, which has absolutely different definitions than what you think it means. When they say you are a person is a homo sapiens, and you go look that up under the Department of Agriculture, they list a human being or a person as a thing or a monster, which comes directly from the Vatican law. So here I tossed out 3 different places with 9 different definitions of what that name, Paul Biener, in all capital letters, represents. So you ask the judge to define the terms. And that is the magic. That's the keys to the kingdom right there. Because if they tell you you're a corporation, then you can get into the birth certificate bond, and the fact that, we had the 1933 bankruptcy, and you have all been pledged, your entire life number has been pledged to satisfy the bankruptcy as collateral, and the state has an account in your name. Your birth certificate was bonded, and they opened up an account on Wall Street, and they trade it. And they're supposed to pay all your debts. That's the world we live in. You don't own anything. You don't own your house. You don't own your kids. You don't own your car. You don't own anything. It's all owned by the state. But the other half of the coin is the state is supposed to take care of your bills. So if the state owns your car, they're supposed to pay you to drive it. They're supposed to pay you to pay the maintenance, replace the tires, fill the gas. Same thing in foreclosures. They're supposed to pay off the mortgage because you have this account in your name that the U.S. corporation has agreed to pay because you have pledged your life labor to pay off the debt of the bankruptcy of the United States in 1933. And so when you get into that, then that exposes the entire fraud of the system, and that causes people to get very, very, very afraid.
Okay. So because you have pledged your life's work and what you said to the government. The government, in turn, has agreed through statute to pay your bills. That's
Yes.
what you just said. Okay,
That
so
is referred to legally as acceptance for value. That is the legal term.
okay, so that being the case, they just forgot to tell us that they were supposed to pay our bills.
That's the game. They forget to tell us everything.
They just forgot to tell us. So if we know that and we call them on it, then that makes getting a refund of everything you've ever paid the IRS easier, because if they did fail to do what they agreed to by contract, which was, okay, if I continue to pay taxes and pay into the IRS and pay off this debt, that they will pay my bills. Now, if they neglect to pay off my bills, then that means that they're in breach of contract, and therefore they have absolutely no authority to collect taxes from me, nor did they ever from the first point of default, which would have been the very first bill that I paid, or the very first gallon of gas I bought after I filled out the W-4 form agreeing to that contract.
Well, yes and no. When you start filling out paperwork, when you fill out a 1040 and you put your signature on it, you have voluntarily agreed to the fraud. The income tax is a voluntary tax. Drake went over this a bit. It's voluntary. But when you fill out a 1040 and you sign it, you have voluntarily agreed to the fraud, and you will pay your taxes.
Well, actually, you haven't. Actually, you haven't, because on the 1040 form, there's always a little box that you can sign in. And anything that is enclosed in a box on a document doesn't exist on the document. The document cannot see it because it's in a box. That's where courts of law, courts of fiction, get everyone, because there's a jury box, there's the bench, and there's the reporter box, and the only two people that are not in a box or that are in the same box would be the two sitting at the tables. There's the plaintiff and the defendant. Those are the only two people in the courtroom that can actually hear each other legally, because they're the only two that are not in a separate box. But when you sign that document, your signature is inside a box, therefore it doesn't exist.
That is true. That is true. That gets very technical, but you're absolutely correct on that. But it's actually a simpler process here with your taxes, because you go to the definitions of income. You have to pay taxes on your income. Well, the statutes and codes, the IRS code is very, very clear on this. Those that are required to pay taxes, required, not voluntary, but required to pay taxes, are those that are either an employee of the U.S. corporation, which most people understand is the federal government, or you're a contractor of the federal government. But either way, you get issued your salary, your income directly from the federal government. Those entities, if you fall under those categories, you are required to pay the income tax. Everybody else is voluntary. And you really don't need to go any further than that.
Okay. So
that's the be all and the end all. And if you look up wages definition, same thing. So again, Rockland is very fond of saying, does this mean what you think it means, or does it mean something else? It always means something else, because they have their own definition. It is a foreign language. I know a lot of people go widescreen and say, oh my God, I can't study law, it's so hard. No, it's not. It's quite simple. It's just a matter of learning another language, learning the definitions. It's actually not complicated at all. It's just sneaky. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned up at the beginning, they'll hide part of one definition in one section of a statute and part of a definition in another code, and it made it very, very difficult until 2002 to trace all this down. And Rod Class is still discovering things as we speak. Part of this whole deal, so, you know, all right, so you know all of this. What do you do about it? Because these guys, as I mentioned prior, are getting 6 months and doing 3. Well, the magic to this, and this is something that Rod's come across in the last 4 or 5 weeks, so after 20 years, this is his most recent discovery, is that every lawyer is required under the statutes and codes, whether it's plaintiff or respondent, whether it's the prosecutor or the defendant, to file an enter for appearance. And it's just a little piece of paper that, you know, has your name and address in the courtroom and the date and whatever. It's a very simple piece of paper. Very, very, very simple. Half sheet of paper for the most part. But it is the magic keys to the kingdom, because what it does is if you fill out an enter for appearance, like all lawyers are required to do, then the judge must hear you. You go into court of law and be pro se, and I'm Captain John, and this is what you're doing to me, and this is all a bunch of hogwash and hooey, and this is the statutes and codes, and here's my paperwork and the pictures and the documents and everything else, and they don't care because they can't hear you, because you are a dead person. You are a soul lost at sea and have not been found. You are a thing. You are a monster. You are a lunatic. Everything I just mentioned is a legal definition. But when you fill out the enter for appearance, you are now on a level playing field. And once you do that, then what Rod will do is will gently and cleverly kind of introduce the fact that he is a live, living, breathing person with a soul, who is not lost at sea and is not a lunatic, and is rational and is here to present their side of the case. And this is the development. This is what's happened in the last 5 or 6 weeks, and I am incredibly excited about it.
Cool. So, Rod Class, people should check him out. I know that some of his stuff is on YouTube. Is there an easy way to get to his TalkShoe page? Because I know he's got over like 300 programs on TalkShoe, and I did at your behest last night download like the last 10 of them, or whatever. Is there an easy way to find his stuff?
Yeah, I had mentioned, I think it was episode 802 on, is this most recent stuff. I mean, you and I were talking last night about very wide and varied subjects, and in 20 years of material, yeah, it's covered, it's in there somewhere. But it's this last 10 episodes from 802 on, with your enter for appearance, and then you get yourself in as a living, breathing man. That's the keys to the kingdom right there, because that opens up the whole can of worms. Now the judge, you have left Admiralty Court and you are now in common law court. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means, among other things, you've established the judge is a living, breathing person, the prosecutor is a living, breathing person, you're a living, breathing person. You are now people, and you are dealing with people. And there is no immunity as a false immunity under the statutes and code has been removed, because you've now converted Admiralty Court into common law court. And so now you're a bunch of guys hanging out together on equal footing. And that's hugely important, because then you can go after the judge on a personal level, because the judge and the lawyers, by virtue of the fact that they belong to the bar, or in the case of the prosecutor and the judge, they're employees of the county, the corporation of the county, so they have an employee relationship, whatever it is, whether it's county court or state court or whatever, and you're on the payroll. And they have a fiduciary duty to the entity that they work for. which is a problem. It's a bias. It's not fair. And you can go after them for that. You can sue them for that. And that's huge. That's huge. Now you're just a bunch of guys jawing about whatever it is that brought you here together.
Okay, and everybody can hear everybody.
And everybody can hear everybody, and that's huge. And then, of course, you can then you get into the stuff that we were talking about earlier. Well, these are, the point is, again, it's administrative law. He's bypassing the statutes and codes, and he's bypassing the law by definition, as I explained it earlier. And we're just going to the administrative rules. We're back to the none in sixth grade, saying when you write a sentence, you've got to stay in between the lines. It's nothing more than that. It is nothing more than that. It's very simple. And when you're dealing with administrative law, for example, here is a prime example of how we all get hosed all the time, everywhere. The administrative law states, for example, you're driving your car and you're pulled over by a police officer in a squad car. Well, that's totally illegal. Just at face value. I'm not going to get into any other further details. A police officer pulled you over while traveling peacefully. And why is that true? Because under the administrative law, no one can be detained or arrested unless there is a warrant with an affidavit filled out. And when's the last time a cop pulled you over and presented you with the affidavit and the warrant? It never happens.
Never
but that's
happens.
administrative law. These are their rules written by their buddies in their private club. And you're just following them. And when you are arrested, you're supposed to be taken directly to a judge for adjudication. No cop has the right to take you to a jail and put you in a cell before you have been brought before a judge. And when's the last time that happened?
Oh, it happens all the time.
So, no, you are arrested and thrown in jail. And when they're good and ready, they bring you to a court of law and they present you before a judge. I've never seen anybody ever arrested anywhere in any of my experience where they were arrested and taken right before a judge. They're thrown into a lockup and processed. But the administrative law says you must be brought before a judge, and only a judge can incarcerate you. A police officer does not have the authority to incarcerate you.
So if he's operating outside, if he's operating outside his authority, he is operating in fraud and is directly damaging you and is personally liable for it.
You betcha.
So
you betcha.
So when he pulls you over, just
most basic form. That's something everybody can understand. So I'm illustrating the difference between administrative law, the rules of behavior of the private club, as opposed to the statutes and codes, and as opposed to the law. It's administrative. It's the none telling you to dot your I's, cross your T's, and put a period at the end of your sentence.
Okay, what about theft of personal property? Like as part of a roadside stop, the cops wants to be a real asshole. He knows that he can't arrest you because you've already told him that he's going to be personally liable for any violation of your rights and freedoms, and that you'll be making a claim against his public hazard bond. But what is there when he turns into a real jerk and he says, well, I'm just going to impound your car. I'll leave you here on the side of the roadway. I'm going to take your property because I can do it. And what do you do then?
Well, I mean, what's your point? You're a host. Okay, that's going to happen. You have to address it later in a court of law before a judge in the manner that I am describing. But that's exactly right. I mean,
so you're saying he has the right.
If it's going to be a push come to shove deal, always be polite. Do not resist unless you run into one of these rogue, mind-controlled, evil demons that wishes to do you unbelievable physical harm or threatens your life. It's a paper game, but you are not in a position to do anything at that point. it's when you're pulled over on a traffic stop. Let me see if I can get this right here. And the cop comes up to your window and says, "Good day, officer. What is the nature of the emergency, and how can I help you?" And the next thing he'll say, whatever. Let me see the driver's license. Am I under arrest? Let me see your license. Am I being detained? You get those questions out immediately. So that sets the stage for what's happening. If they're going to go under the statutes and codes, your civil rights are being violated because you have the right to travel freely and unimpeded in this country, and that has been breached by them pulling you over. And since that has happened, you have recourse. But you're not, make sure you always be polite with the cop, never be confrontational. I tell them right up front, I have absolutely zero desire or intention of any kind to harm anyone. I will not resist. I'm not a threat to you. I will not hurt you in any way, shape, or form. We need to discuss, as Rod Class says, the definitions. This is really important with the cop when you pull them over. I guess his example last night was, do you understand these rights? And Rod Class says, no. We need to understand each other. We need to know what each other's definitions of the law are so that we're all on the same page. So I say apple and you see an apple instead of I say apple and you see an orange. So you have to establish that right there. And you can do this very calmly and very serenely. But what you were getting at earlier, if it gets really ugly. Because I told Sheriff David Beth in Kenosha County some time back, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. If I have established all of this, and this officer of the law has now violated my civil rights because they have impeded my right to travel across the country, well, then there's there's federal law that says you're a private investigator general and a bounty hunter. And that gives you the right to arrest a cop right there on the spot for violation of your civil rights. Now, very rarely you're going to get away with that. But my point is, if I got a guy coming at me with a gun or with a can of mace or pepper spray, or these guys look like they want to stomp the Jesus out of me, that's my green light to defend myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am now in the process of arresting someone who has violated my civil rights, and I don't have the statutes and codes for the private investigator general, but this is their rules. This is all administrative.
Okay, so, but that being said, how do they have the right for the theft of your private property? How do they have the right to steal that from you? Oh, and I believe we lost him. Okay, we'll get him back in just a moment. We are talking about the difference between statutes and codes and common law, the law between people and the law between corporations. We're talking about the difference, and I wonder if somebody lost a battery. Oh, interesting. Well, either somebody lost a battery or somebody does not want us to talk about this, particularly on the radio. So, either way, we'll be back after this. This is listener-supported health and wellness radio, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. You're listening to the Global Awakening Radio Network. And we're back on the Saturday Kickstart, and we're talking about all things law, and we're talking about statutes and codes, and oh boy, we're having a lot of fun so far. Now, my question, right before we got so rudely interrupted, was now that being the case, if your personal liberties are being violated just purely by virtue of the fact that they stopped you, first of all, they can't use their emergency lights to pull you over because without committing fraud, because that is creating an emergency in which to pull you over when no emergency existed. Okay, they're creating one, so they can't use the lights. If they do use the lights and, shine that spotlight in your rearview mirror, your side mirror, just to blind you by the light, to distract you and all that stuff, they can't do that. Now, that being the case, if they've already violated your personal liberties and impeded your travels without cause, what gives them the right to steal your private property? If they tow your vehicle, if they take control of your vehicle, if they take control of your car, you don't want to call it a vehicle because they've already defined that in their law books as to mean something completely different as to what you think it means. But if they've already stolen your property, or if they propose to steal your property, how can they do that? And if they do attempt to do that, can you inform them of a fee schedule and say, if you're going to violate my rights, if you're going to violate my property, there isn't anything I can do about that. However, it's going to cost you because for every day or fraction thereof, depriving me of any personal property for no matter what period of time, for any period of time, will be billed against your public hazard bond at $100,000 per occurrence. So, that being the case, if they tow your car, if they impound your car, it costs them $100,000. Even if they just hook it up to the tow truck and put it back down on the ground, they've still stolen it because you don't have it within your control. It's under their control. As long as it's under their control, they are liable based on the fee schedule. Now, if they start digging through your pockets and they take your phone, and even if they take your phone and they have it in their hand and they put it on the trunk of your car, they still had the phone in their hand. So they had taken possession of your personal property, irrespective of how long they had it. They still had possession of it. There's another $100,000. If they take the change out of your pocket, that's $100,000 for every denomination of currency in your pocket. Let's say you've got 3 or 4 quarters, 5 or 6 dimes, couple of nickels, and a few pennies that you just can't seem to get rid of. Every single one of those denominations is worth $100,000, even if they pull it out of your pocket and immediately put it down, because there's no time limit on it. As long as they touch it, it's under their control. They take your keys out of your pocket, same difference, $100,000. So, if you're charging them $1 million for violating your rights and for detaining you, and you're charging them $100,000 for every occurrence of theft of personal property or possession of your personal property without your permission, you could easily, bill that guy's bond $2-3 million just by one traffic stop. What do you think of that?
Well, yes. And unfortunately, what we have is apples, pears, peaches, grapefruit, and bananas on the table here. But I'll address your question first. In order to have a fee schedule, and I want to back up here and state that what we're discussing here, so people are very clear on this, that what we're talking about has zero to do with freemen. It has zero to do with sovereigns. It has zero to do with constitutionalists. This is administrative law. So when you talk about a fee schedule, you put the cart before the horse. You have to back up, and I think it's the UCC 1 filing. You have to declare yourself a living, breathing person with the corresponding paperwork, and that you are not beholden to the statutes and codes because you are not a corporation. And the statutes and codes, everything that a cop operates by, is a business transaction between two corporations. And you are not a corporation. And yet they are treating you as such. So that, when you talk about a fee schedule, you have a lot of other stuff that you need to do way before this ever happened. You can't just blatantly, I understand your point, and it is absolutely correct, provided you have already declared yourself a living, breathing soul, and you have put before the public record your fee schedule. All of this had to have been done at some time prior to the incident that you described. You can't just blatantly go in there and say, as you stated, 100 grand for this, 100 grand for that. That could all be very well and true, provided you've already supplied that paperwork to the public record.
Okay.
So that's the important thing there. But we can back up a little bit here, and even though the statutes and codes are all fraud, we're back to administrative law. So if you're going to work with the statutes and codes and the fraud that belies, even though you know you are not subject to that because you are not a corporation, the cop on the street isn't going to know that. So if he pulls you over under the fraud of the statutes and codes, he must have a reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion. Well, what's that? Well, I see you crossing the white line on the shoulder. I just got a ticket in that regard a couple of months back. I crossed over the shoulder, and of course the sign was right there. It says, "Do not drive on shoulder." Blah 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 blah. So that was reasonable suspicion. So then he comes up and he smells alcohol on my breath. So that's probable cause. If they don't have reasonable suspicion and they don't have probable cause, under the statutes and codes, they have violated their administrative procedure. So that's an apple, with the fee schedule, and that's an orange with, again, administrative law following their own rules of statutes and codes. And when a cop pulls you over, you do not have to answer any questions, and you shouldn't. And you can refuse you can refuse to be searched, you can refuse to get out of the car, you can refuse to have your car searched. And that's all very legal and proper.
You can refuse to roll down your window farther than is necessary to be able to hear him.
Absolutely right. Enough to have a conversation, not enough for him to get in.
Yep, and lock the doors.
As the case may be.
Lock the doors because they will open them and they will drag you out of the car.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why all these arbitrary traffic stops are illegal.
Okay, unless they can make a case for having reasonable suspicion.
Yes, probable cause and reasonable suspicion in that order. Now, something that Rod Class has been pointed out, and I'm not sure how this all plays out in big stops. I'm sorry. I have a bird feeder outside my living room window, and the squirrels love to try to negotiate it. And one of the squirrels made it to the bird feeder and just fell off. It was pretty funny. I got squirrels dropping off of bird feeders over here. We have the right to travel unimpeded, and that's a violation of your civil rights. It's just that simple.
Okay. But under statutes and codes, they would have the right to take your personal property, impede and impound your vehicle.
If they have reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Otherwise, as Rod Class was pointing out, and I lost my train of thought because I'm under serious microwave attack here. Now I lost it again.
We can talk about the squirrels for a minute if you want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, we were talking about theft of personal property and if they have reasonable suspicion and probable cause. You're saying it's
right,
okay to do that?
But technically, any arrest must have the probable cause written in an affidavit form and be very specific. And more importantly, and another thing that's hugely important, is a signed complaint. Now, when's that ever happened in a traffic stop? Never.
No, never.
So there's lots of ways of attacking that type of situation.
Okay. But
and in the end, if you just keep it calm, if you just keep it easy, I mean, you're going to run into that monster occasionally, and this all becomes moot. Some 20-something full of piss and vinegar that's all hot on DHS, and he's going to be a bad guy wannabe, and he wants to play with the cabal, and he thinks he's all kinds of God. You're not going to get anywhere with that anyway. And they're out there, and it's getting worse because of mind control. But in general, if you're calm, you can explain to this officer that he is not a police officer. He is a peace officer. And he works for a corporation, a corporate employee. And walk that person through, because the bottom line is every cop will understand when you tell them ignorance of the law is no defense. Mm-hmm. And have the same kinds of conversations that I had in a carpool. And you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised, because you can explain to this officer that you are beholden to follow the rules, and if you don't follow the rules, then I can come back and go after your performance bond for all the reasons you mentioned prior.
Mm-hmm.
But just keep it non-confrontational. You may or may not be able to have this conversation, but be ready to have that conversation, because chances are you'll find some cop that gets it, and so another victory for the good guys.
Mm-hmm. And that cop will deal with everybody else that he pulls over after that point differently.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was coming back from a yacht charter a couple of years back. I left downtown Chicago about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I dropped one of my crew off at her home. And as I pulled in front of her home, I had turned off my lights. And it's like 1 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night, Saturday morning. And so I left her home, and I got back out on Main Street in the city of Chicago. And I see a squad car's lights behind me. And, of course, I'm doing the speed limit. I'm rock solid sober because I just did a charter. And I just kept driving. I kept driving. Finally, it dawned on me that I thought this cop was going to pass me. I haven't been pulled over in 30 frickin' years. Mm-hmm. So finally, it suddenly dawned on me that this police officer is actually interested in talking to me. So I pulled over, and it was a Chicago PD, and he was incensed at the point. He was a black guy, I was a white guy, we're on the white side of town, and he was incensed that I had not pulled over. He said, "Don't you pull over for police?" And I slipped in and I said, in all sincerity, mind you, I can't believe that you wanted to pull me over. I thought you were trying to get past me. I had no idea why anybody would want to pull me over. And that just flabbergasted. Well, I didn't have my headlights on. So, I mean, obviously that, from his perspective, it's a valid reason.
Right.
So he grabbed my license and he ran a check on me and came back, and he just basically berated me for how long it took me to find my insurance card and show a little more respect for the police and sent me on my way without a citation.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be sincere and calm.
Right. Well, see, I probably wouldn't have gotten through that quite as gracefully as you did, because as far as I'm concerned, with all the videos that I've seen of abuses of people wearing badges and uniforms, they have to demonstrate to me that they're worthy of my respect very, very early on in the exchange, very early on, because laws, through statutes and codes, even though it's a definite no-no for anyone to pass a law or for a law to go on the books that doesn't apply equally to all persons, to all people, But one of the cornerstones of what allows cops to do what they do is that they are allowed to engage in disinformation for the purposes of interrogation. Okay, well, hello, I'm not allowed to engage in disinformation for any purpose whatsoever when interacting with a cop. However, they can lie to me all day long. So therefore, they have not shown me, they've not proven to me that they are ethical, that they are honorable. They have not proven to me that they should be afforded that specific privilege of being able to lie right in my face without my saying anything about it. So if they can lie to me when they talk to me, as far as I'm concerned, everything they say is a lie. So I have no interest in talking to them. They have no honor. They have no ethics. So it probably would not have gone so well for me because at that point he would not have demonstrated to me, obviously, that he was worthy of my respect. So,
well, that's a double-edged sword. Now, I agree 100% with what you just stated, but it's a double-edged sword. That's one edge of the sword, okay, and that's dealing with this individual who is a, quote, police officer, a corporate employee violating your civil rights. The other half of the coin is he's just a guy making $50,000 a year and trying to put food on his table and go to church on Sunday. And it is my intention to not address him as a police officer and discuss the legalities of the situation. It's more one, human being to another on this earth at this time under cabal control of all this evil. And do you understand what it is that you're doing? Do you understand where you're at and why you've been defrauded and now are trying to defraud me? And that's the approach to that, the human approach. That's the approach that I try to take. That's the other side, the other edge of the sword. And in that situation I just illustrated by being pulled over, and I was absolutely flabbergasted. And I just looked at him and said, I can't believe a cop would ever want to pull me over for anything. I'm not speeding. I'm sober. My lights are all lit. Why are you pulling me over? And he was just flabbergasted by that because it was sincere. I'm not evading arrest. I'm not showing lack of respect. He had no clue that my lights were off or why you would bother me.
Well, it still couldn't hurt, when you're starting the exchange. Just explain to the cop. It's my understanding that you are afforded the flexibility by law to engage in disinformation for the purposes of interrogation. However, I'm not afforded the same right. Now, considering a law, it cannot be a law if it does not apply to everyone equally. How are we going to do this? Are we going to speak honestly and ethically with each other and truthfully, or are we both going to engage in disinformation? You decide. You tell me how this is going to go right now, and I'll proceed accordingly.
Now, if I had taken that approach in my jury summons, they would have incarcerated me. Because he took it personal right to the judge. Now, I was clever enough to avoid that situation. I didn't say the judge was being fraudulent. I said the statutes and codes are fraudulent. So I avoided that confrontation. And that, to me, is paramount if you want to have a one-to-one personal human conversation with this, quote, officer of the law over what just happened. If you take that position, and you're absolutely correct, all you're going to do is exacerbate and inflate a bad situation.
Well, no, all I would be doing at that point would be, I would be asking him, are we going to talk man to man? honestly and be straight with each other and conduct whatever occurs here in as pleasant a manner as possible? Or are you going to try and twist either what I say or ask questions to manipulate me into incriminating myself in some manner so you can fill your ticket book? What are we going to do? Are we going to be, just two guys sitting on the side of the road talking, getting business done, whatever? Or are you going to stick with your garbage playbook in which I already know the rules? So, I'll return each volley and, then we'll just go that way. What do you say? You going to be an upstanding dude or what?
Rod Class has a much better presentation, is the word I'm looking for here.
So I obviously need to listen to more. Addressing
the same concerns that you had. And this was in his latest recording. I was listening to it last night. So you're in that situation. It all gets back to our earlier part of our conversation about definitions. Does the word person mean what you think it means, or does it mean something else? And so in that vein, what Rod will do is try to get the conversation steered into a direction where I do not understand what is transpiring here, officer. We need to be speaking the same language. We need to know that the definition of an orange is a small, round, orange-colored fruit. We need to all know that that's what you mean by orange, so that I know that you mean orange. And so that's the approach that he uses with an officer of the law. Instead of getting into, reasonable suspicion, probable cause, whatever, you engage the officer with the concerns that you have from that approach. I need to understand what it is that you are telling me, so that we all have the same definition of the same words. And that is an awesome approach. And again, it's a very humanistic approach. And it will definitely take the cop and get him off guard. It will definitely put him in an imbalanced position.
And you gotta love that, right?
Well, I do. Now we're on my turf.
Okay. So, what about interactions with other jurors, like in the jury pool room? You're basically sitting around there, you're reading magazines, whatever. What about some of the conversations that you had with other jurors, like either prior to or following your interactions with the judges? How did those go?
Well, when I got booted out of the first court, I was returned to the holding area for jurors. And, later on in the afternoon, I was called up for the second court. But while I'm in this holding area, I just happened to strike up a conversation with a guy who turned out to be a professor from Northwestern University. And we got into this conversation about the statutes and codes and the fraud behind it. And I talked to him for about 45 minutes. Here's a very smart guy who knows, but is completely foreign to any of this. And at a certain point in the conversation, he looked at me in all sincerity, he put his hands up, and he said, "Look, you have so overwhelmed me at this point with what you've told me, I have to stop." I have to stop here. I know that you've got more to tell me, but I'm absolutely overwhelmed, and I need to digest and process what you've told me. So I thought that was pretty cool. The 20-somethings, before I entered into the first court, they were incredulous. Because I told them point blank, I said, I'm going to be walking out of here very shortly. It is my purpose, it is my stated purpose to get out of jury duty. But as I put in that post I shared on Facebook, is that I did it with honesty and sincerity and no BS. When I was telling these 20-somethings, how do you explain this to people in a hallway in 5 minutes? Because that's basically the time frame I had. Mm-hmm. So you can only just give the title of the book. You can't even give the title of a chapter. You didn't give the title of the book. This is what it's all about. But then you go out and you walk the walk. And the judge, that female judge, was kind enough to respond in a manner that gave credence to what I had just stated. Because these kids, not knowing anything other than, this brief title of the subject, saw the reaction of the judge. And it was her reaction that will give credence to what I stated. And every one of those people are going to go home and find out what it is that I knew that the judge was so afraid of. And to me, that's a huge victory.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge victory.
So you would. So are you thinking of volunteering for jury duty again?
Well, first of all, I didn't volunteer. I got volunteered.
No, well, I'm wondering if you can volunteer because I've got so many addresses and I've been so many different places. It would be next to impossible for them to actually find me to send me a jury notice. As a matter of fact, they'll probably, my name comes up in a pool. They'll probably send a notice, to an old address or whatever, and it'll wind up in the garbage. And I'll probably be answering to them saying, "Well, we called you up for jury duty. You refused to show up." So
I'm over here grinning because I spent a little over 18 years living in the U.S. Virgin Islands on the island of St. Thomas. And in the entire time that I lived there, 18 years, I was never called up for jury duty once. And I'm going to get back to that in a minute. But when I bought my farm in Wisconsin, I didn't have my driver's license 1 month and I was called up.
Uh-huh.
Now, getting back to the U.S. Virgin Islands, it's such an interesting and silly place. The jury that's a profession. That's a job. The same 12 people that were on a jury 3 years ago are the same 12 people that are on a jury today.
Mm-hmm.
That's their job because of nepotism and cronyism and whatever. It's the same people. And, when you're in the land of West Indians, and, 95% of the population is West Indian, black, and you're in a minority white with the last name that I have, you will never be called. It's not going to happen. It'll never happen. But a sidebar to this, because the Virgin Islands, I'm going to tie this in. In the mid to late 90s, the St. Thomas Police Department really went wild on DWCs, and that's driving while Caucasian. Now, black people are very familiar with the concept, driving while black. And getting pulled over. Well, because the roles are reversed in the Virgin Islands, it's driving while Caucasian. So I had been issued over a 4 or 5 year period. I had 3 traffic citations, and I went to court, and I fought it, and I lost, and I paid double because that's what happens when you contest. You pay double the fine.
Uh-huh.
But the third time, and I really had, it was a really horse hockey kind of deal, but I just destroyed the cop, and it was the third time. 3 times was a trick, and I'm going to explain to you that there's a plan operation here over this last 5 years and 3 court appearances. So I destroyed this cop. I just ripped him a new bunghole. I had the judge in stitches. I had the jury in stitches. I had the people in the gallery in stitches. And in the end, the judge still ruled against me, and he still found me guilty, and he still fined me double, but never again did the St. Thomas PD ever bother me for the rest of the time that I lived there. Mm-hmm. Because it wasn't worth their time because of the shellacking I gave this cop in court. Now, as the case was dismissed and culminated, I'm walking through the gallery, and this guy walks up. He happened to be a white guy. And he introduces himself, and this is the gospel truth. He says, "I am the Attorney General of the U.S. Virgin Islands, do you have a Juris Doctorate? Are you a member of a bar? And will you come work for me?
Then I guess I guess the answer to those questions would be no, no, and hell no.
That's right. But the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I got 3 citations over a 5-year period. I contested them all, and finally they got the message, leave Captain John alone.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. And for the rest of my time, I never had an issue with the St. Thomas PD. Ever.
That's interesting. So you just have to make a name for yourself, and that's it.
Well, yeah, but yeah. Yeah, and people knew me on island. They know that I'm not prejudiced. They know that I'm honest. They know that I have a calm demeanor. And they know if they mess with me, I will come at them. I will kill a mosquito with a cannon. I will come after you until perdition rolls over. And I won't back off. I won't back down. I won't back out. And I won't quit. And, in the Virgin Islands, they're a little slower down there. Life in the Caribbean, manana, man. So it took me 5 years to get that. But for example, there's 2 judges in downtown Chicago that'll never mess with me.
Okay, well, speaking of juries, I do have to throw out kudos to New York State because all New York State counties now have groups that are forming common law grand juries. All. They've got 100% coverage, all counties in the state of New York.
Right, they have 52 counties. They have completed their entire circuit.
They've completed their entire circuit. How close is the state you live in?
Ha! I'm going to answer that question this way. When I do my building inspection stuff for national disasters, I often find myself in New Orleans. And I'll be talking to the local folks, and it's helpful to understand that I have been in every major ghetto of every major city in the United States. I have the privilege and the honor of serving the people who need the help the most. So when I'm in New Orleans and I'm in these neighborhoods, I berate them for their corruption in New Orleans specifically and in Louisiana in general. And of course, you always get this local response, well, who are you, an outsider, to come in and tell us about our corruption problems? And I simply stated, to answer your question, I'm from Illinois. And they all bow to the corruption master. So this state is highly, highly, highly corrupt. I got a T-shirt for Christmas last year that a friend of mine had printed up specifically for me that says, "Welcome to the great state of Illinois, where our governors make our license plates."
Okay.
You get it?
No, actually,
they're all
I don't.
well, we have Governor Ryan. I think he's in a halfway house. He just got out of jail for his 6-year sentence. Governor
okay.
Blagojevich is in a jail in Colorado as we speak. That's the last 2 governors of the state of Illinois. They both went down. I think Rod got 12 years and Ryan got 6. So what we have here is a very unique situation in that, A, we have this incredible level of corruption. And it doesn't, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. This is not a political deal. Everybody's stealing everything everywhere all the time on both sides of the aisle. So this is not a political issue. And then we have a more overbearing influence now through the cabal as we get closer to the event, specifically through Rahm Emanuel and Mike Madigan and Dick Durbin and Mark Kirk, all representing the cabal and doing their bidding. So we have the corruption in general. Everybody's got their hand out, on the take, whatever. And then we have the cabal agenda on top of that. I don't want to get into this too much, but I'm very familiar with Mr. Darish and the National Liberty Alliance and Citizens Grand Juries. I know the people in the state of Illinois who are the first that we're aware of that are trying to get this up and running. I met the state coordinator It's a group of about 12 very dedicated individuals. They've been doing this for off and on in different shapes and fashions for about 10 years. And the director of the grand juries for the state of Illinois just got out of jail 2 weeks ago, doing his 6 months for contempt of court and serving his 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that would not have happened to me.
Apparently not.
Now, there are two of us. I don't have permission to mention his name, but people are familiar with him. He's around. And we're interested because we live together, live close to each other, and we see each other personally every so often. We are interested in going forward with citizens' grand juries in our respective counties. And we are keeping it on a rather low key at this point because the state is so corrupt, and the cabal, and the head cabal dog in the state of Illinois, without any question, is Rahm Emanuel. And these guys will hurt you. They will hurt you. You can be in physical danger. This is not a joke. This is a very, very serious situation. We have left the courtroom. We've left the side of the road with the cops, and we're now in bed with the really bad guys who will hurt you. And they said literally in this court, when they found the director of the state of Illinois Citizens Grand Jury guilty of contempt of court, that we are making an example of you. They said that literally. I haven't seen the court transcripts yet, so I'm going on what I was told. But you get the idea here.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
So that's the situation we're in here. I'm very specific about this. I don't know what other grand juries in other states have done, but because of the unique situation here, the first thing I will do when I strike up some interest for people that want to be members of the grand jury is the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to teach them what Rod Class has just discovered in episode 802 on, which is you first establish, you first establish yourself with the enter of appearance. Then you do your whole I'm a living, breathing man thing, but you got to be slick about it. And then you understand the concept of what is that entity in all capital letters. I want a definition by the judge. So that in the event, just like what this other group experienced, is that they're trying to get up and running, and they're putting their toe in the pond, and they're getting slapped down. Had they done what I have just described, that would have never happened.
Okay. And
now, the most important thing and this leads into an incredibly important point, and I posted this in great length on Sweet Jurists Law on Facebook. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing in this regard. Do not try any of this, whether it's on the side of the road talking to a cop, it's a jury summons, or you're actually facing charges in a court of law. Do not do any of this half-cocked. You don't want to be a little pregnant. You need to own this information. You need to understand the specifics. You need to understand the big picture. This is not hard. You need to turn the TV off and do what I do. Spend a couple of hours every night just covering this stuff and own it. You need to own this information because when you walk into these situations, these adversaries are there. They're vicious. They want to chop you up with a chainsaw. They want to mangle you and destroy you. And you need to be able to take on all comers with all questions from all different directions to make your presentation. And I can't emphasize that enough. That's why this gentleman who is the director of the Citizens Grand Juries in the state of Illinois went to jail. He did not own this information. He went in with the whole crap, I'm a free man, I'm a living, breathing soul, and I'm not a question and blah, 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 and the judge threw him in jail. So you've got to own this information. You've got to do your homework. You've got to be prepared. And the second most important thing is that you need, the way that this carries forward is you need to start filing complaints against your public officials for violations. For example, anywhere anybody lives in the country, you can go after your local, county, state, and public officials for geoengineering. Those of you who read my post, I don't use the term chemtrail anymore. I put that video up. It's geoengineering. Chemtrail is a cabal plot. When you look up WikiLeaks and you go chemtrail, it says conspiracy theory. That's all part of cabal. When you talk about geoengineering, you're talking about the science. Now, everybody is being inundated by the geoengineering. Under the Nuremberg Treaty, and I found this out a couple of weeks ago, it just tickles my butt beyond belief. Under the Nuremberg Treaty, you cannot subject citizens of the United States with biological or chemical testing or microwaves without their full knowledge and consent. Now, nobody's ever asked me if I wanted to be bombed by geoengineering. Nobody's ever informed me of that. Nobody has ever asked me for permission to hit me with extra low frequency pulse microwaves, and they have violated the Nuremberg Treaty. Well, that is a act of treason. And you can go after your county reps, your mayor, your state senators and congressmen, your federal congressmen, ad infinitum. And this is incredibly powerful because they are in violation of a treaty. And this gets back to law. Remember the definition of law. Passed by both houses, put in a register, and acting legislation. And there's no argument about the law because the law is backed up by the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the amendments, blah, 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 blah. And that's the law. And there's no way of getting around it. This is incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful.
Okay, so how do you connect your local lawmakers, your local legislators, with the geoengineering? How do you connect the dots? How do you connect them with either having any connection to it, any authority over it, or any capacity to stop it?
My immediate response, my immediate thought is the Illinois EPA has laws governing air pollution. Boom, done, finished.
Okay, and
and so does the federal EPA. So that's your geoengineering thing.
Okay, and so
they're in violation of the law.
They're in violation of the EPA law.
Well, actually, the statutes and codes, I should say. But
statutes.
Even I get tripped up. They're in violation of the statutes and codes, and that makes them liable.
Okay, so
and as far as the microwave towers are concerned, somebody, like in the county I live in, somebody at the county level had to cut the permits for those towers. Boom, smack, there you go, liability.
Okay, so even if you can't get them for geoengineering by depositing things in the atmosphere, you can still get them on the ground.
Absolutely.
Well, hey,
and these are things that I am moving forward on right now. I'm looking very seriously into this. And that's all I really want to say right now because they're listening.
Oh yeah, of course, and it was actually nice of them to actually just interrupt our phone call once today.
Well, obviously Drake is sleeping because the fan club has time to mess with us.
Obviously.
Drake's getting a nap.
Okay.
Oh, incidentally, I mentioned this to you yesterday, and I wish to do this here on the show. I want to say hello to my NSA personal assistant, Horace, who works for Project Stellar Wind in Bluffdale, Utah. Hi, guys.
So you have a personal assistant?
Oh, well, I assume most people they're just being data mined. I'm pretty sure at this stage of the game that I got a guy who's listening to this conversation right now. I have an elevated status with these guys. Mm-hmm. Instead of data mining and just recording all of my phone conversations and putting in some database to pull up to mess with me later, they're listening to every phone call.
Well, I enjoy talking to them, because it gives you, it's kind of like religion. It gives you the feeling that you're not alone. Just knowing that every time you pick up the phone or every time you talk to anybody, that there is always someone there. There's always your most ardent fan, and I enjoy talking to them. And sometimes I give them a hard time. Sometimes I purposely talk in cryptic fashion. I mean, you really don't even want to know how I explained. Well, actually, no, I can actually tell you. One of the events that I did today was that I dropped off a cat at a vet to be fixed. Okay, and how I explained to somebody that I was Skyping with. First of all, I started it with the eagle has landed and then said nothing else. And then the person said where, and I said the package has been delivered to the predetermined location. Further information requires use of communication tack 2. Seeds will mature by 5:30 p.m. today. All is on schedule. Extraction will occur at 17:30 hours. And our conversation got interrupted at that point. I got knocked off the phone.
Yeah, well, I play a similar game, not quite as elaborate, but this is a takeoff on George Carlin's 7 words you can't say on TV.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so the NSA has filters, and they pick up on keywords. So I'll do something similar to you, to what you're doing, but I'll just ramble off jihad, atom bomb, terrorist, poisoning, chemtrails, shoot the president.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And that just sets off 17 different flags. And my thought is if they're paying attention to me, a guy who's not important in the great scheme of anything, then that draws away resources so that the people that are actually a little higher up the scale that are actually getting things done, that relieves the pressure.
Oh, absolutely. It most certainly does. It most certainly does. And
so we're running the same program. We just have a different semantics involved.
Yeah,
I just do the 7 words you can't say on in front of the NSA, and you're telling stories. Either way, we're getting to the same place.
Yeah, of course. Why not? No, actually,
it's fun.
Have
it's
you seen
fun.
the list?
Have a ball.
Have you seen the list? There's 300, at least 300 keywords that come up. I mean, you can't even talk about knitting for crying out loud without them thinking that you're plotting to stab somebody with the needles.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's
yeah. It's
that to go to that extreme has everything to do with the so many angles we are being attacked by: poison air, poison food, poison water, mind control of all various shapes and sizes, propaganda on TV, alpha waves, all that crap. When you're attacked that much from so many different directions, the sheeple actually buy into and believe this crap.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of their plan, and they're executing it as they see fit. So
right. It
makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. Well, we've got about 4 minutes left. Is there anything that you want to say to wrap up, or just briefly touch on key points that you had shared over the course of the last 2 enjoyable hours?
Yeah. Rod Class, I recommend everybody look at episodes 802 up to the last one.
And all you have to do is Google Rod Class Talk Shoe, by the way. It comes up first hit. Yeah,
so it's Talk Shoe. And understand that, the 20 years of information that he acquired prior to that time is all valid. It's all very valid, but it's basically, it hasn't permitted us to win court. And being a sailboat racer, I like to win. And so I'm interested in things that win. So you can, you don't have to spend the 3 years of waddling through all the stuff that I had done. You can basically just concentrate on his last, from 802 on to the end, and it's all about the enter for appearance, which is huge. That's a recent discovery. That is the keys, the potential, as I describe it, keys to the palace. Now the court hears you and reads your paperwork. That's hugely, hugely, hugely important. So if you do that, you've got a fighting chance. So that's really important. I can't overemphasize that enough. And that will give you the ability to be heard in court. And then the other thing is this warning once again, and I use the state director of the Illinois grand juries as an example. Don't go in with a little knowledge being a dangerous thing. You cannot be a little pregnant. You need to own all this information. And these kinds of conversations are good for me because I have a limited level of understanding, and I still am acquiring knowledge so that my presentation is better. But don't go off half-cocked. Know what you're talking about. Spend some time. And really, an hour or two a night for 3 weeks is about all you really need to understand what I have just mentioned. You don't have to get into great detail. And then you own that information. And then you can go toe-to-toe with a judge. And, I'm still kind of, the peacock in the barnyard with my tail feathers out because of the interaction I had with the two judges. I feel pretty good about that because I was able to walk the walk. I was able to finally get in a court of law before real judges and practice, where I was not a defendant or a respondent. And it was awesome. It works. It's real. It's happening. And if I can do it instead of iniquity that Chicago is, you can do it where you live. It couldn't possibly be any worse.
I would have to agree with you there. Just briefly recapping some information. First of all, kudos to New York for their common law grand jury. If you hear somebody talking about a common law grand jury in your area, by all means, bend an ear and listen to them. See if you can figure out how you can be a part of it. And Rod Class, of course, you can Google Rod Class Talk Show. That'll take you right to it. Dean Clifford's got some interesting stuff in the Freeman side of things. Stop the Pirates. That's
blog. StopThePiratesBlog.com.
StopThePiratesBlog.com. And you can also check out Peter Hendrickson's book, Cracking the Code, if you have a mind to give the IRS a noogie that'll last about 1.5 years. David Kreger.
LostHorizons.com is his website. I recommend it. Get on the newsletter list. Have the emails sent out. He sends out a newsletter about every week. LostHorizons.com.
And David Kreger, check out Clouded Title and do some research. And like you said, own the information and control the room. Don't let them get you. So
don't be confrontational. Be sweet as pie.
Absolutely.
And don't make it personal. This is just business. You know it. I know it. These are commerce transactions between two corporations, Judge. This is just business. And these are your rules written by your little club that you are not following. They are not following the procedural rules that they have written for themselves. This precludes ever getting your case going on the merits as they see it. It'll never happen. It'll never happen.
Right.
You're nipping it in the bud before it gets going.
There you go. Captain John, thank you so much for being here. I'd love to have you on again sometime if you're game.
And I'll leave you with two quick questions. You know the difference between a carp and a lawyer?
No.
One is a scum-sucking bottom dweller, and the other is a fish. And the last thing I'll leave you with very quickly is, what do you call a lawyer with an IQ of 50?
Gifted.
Your Honor.
Okay. All right.
I'm done.
Thank you so much for being with us. This has been the Global Awakening Radio Network's special presentation of all things law, statutes, acts, and codes. This is listener-supported health and wellness radio, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. You're listening to the Global Awakening Radio Network.